So, very good afternoon to all present. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the concluding session of the 6th EU India Energy Regulatory Workshop Series being organized under the EUC CP by FSR Global. And the topic of today's discussion is offshore wind energy. And I'm Parul Bakshi, a research fellow at FSR Global. I'll be your moderator for this session. Without further ado, I welcome Shweta Ravi Kumar, Executive Director, to please give her welcome address. Over to you, Shweta.
Thanks, Parul. Very good afternoon and good morning to friends and colleagues from Europe. It's really a pleasure for us to have this particular episode because it's a completion of 6 cycles of the EU-India Regulatory Workshop series, where we have had the chance to go into certain topics deeper and deeper over the years. And I think it's a very unique series because we just didn't take a topic one off and try to discuss it and forget about it, but rather as a community, we have been discussing and trying to see how we can connect the dots between the different topics. And some of the engagements have also resulted in us having a research report that came out, and some of the discussions have led to other bigger initiatives, such as the Smart Grid Observatory. So today is the last of the 6-part series within the 6th cycle. Too many sixes, but just bear with me. And we're very happy to bring you a slightly unique topic for the last session, which is on offshore wind, a topic that's discussed extensively in the European energy corridors, but India is also gearing up to investigate and roll out this as another alternative clean energy energy production into the energy mix for India, and is looking to explore how we can tap into the potential that India has. And not just that, a lot of other neighboring countries with coastlines are also interested in trying to understand how offshore wind can work in this side of the world. So we're happy to bring to you this topic today, and we have a stellar set of speakers here. Parul will quickly introduce you to each of them. We invite all of the discussants and all of the participants to make sure that you drop your questions in the chat box, and we'll pick it up towards the end of the session, when the speakers will also be available to answer some of them. So this is definitely not the last of the different series that we'll have with the EU delegation to India. We'll continue this, but up until the next time, this is the last in this cycle. But with that, I'll give the floor to Johanna, who's our counterpart from the European side, who would like to also say a few words.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, a big thanks to the Florence School of Regulation for organizing this 6th edition of the EU-India Regulatory Workshop series, as you just mentioned, Sweta, which has become a strong symbol of cooperation between India and the EU in the past years. So it is a great pleasure for me to take part in the workshop on offshore wind today, as we are actually at a very interesting moment in our EU-India cooperation, because we are currently drafting the EU-India Strategic Roadmap 2030, which will lay the ground for our strategic cooperation in the 5 coming years. So the EU has been a leader in offshore wind energy with significant investments and technological advancement in the sector. So countries like Germany and Denmark, for example, have established themselves as pioneers in offshore wind energy, with large-scale projects contributing significantly to their renewable energy portfolios. The EU has set ambitious targets to increase its offshore wind capacity, aiming to reach 300 gigawatt by 2050. The deployment of offshore wind energy is therefore at the core of delivering the European Green Deal, which is our main strategy. And a lot of initiatives have been introduced in the past couple of years, like, for example, the European Wind Power Action Plan. So what is interesting is that we can already witness that the expansion of wind energy and the wind industry across the EU has created quality jobs and enhanced our energy security. In EU and India, India's commitment to clean energy transition is becoming more and more tangible, as you know. So India has, of course, also set very ambitious targets for renewable energy generation capacity. and has implemented new markets design regulations and network planning strategies, both domestically and also internationally. This makes India's strategy one of the world's largest energy transition programs. And the most prominent example is India's national offshore wind energy policy, as you are all aware of, I guess, which constitutes the first major step taken to harness this potential. It has recently identified several offshore wind sites along the coastlines of Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, and is working towards developing offshore wind projects to meet its renewable energy targets in collaboration with its Center of Excellency on Offshore Wind, supported by Denmark. But I guess we will hear more about that later on. And by partnering with the EU on offshore wind projects, India aims to tap into its vast coastline and abundant wind resources to diversify its energy mix and reduce its carbon footprint. So this collaboration is very important to us, and it's a win-win proposition, offering both economic and environmental benefits for both regions. The EU Trade and Technology Council that was recently established takes stock of the existing cooperation in this sector with a view to prepare a dialogue on resilience of supply chains, for example. And Working Group 3 of this Trade and Technology Council will explore synergies of EU and Indian supply chains for offshore wind in particular. So the EU-India Clean Energy and Climate Partnership that was agreed by our European and Indian leaders at the 2016 summit promotes policy and regulatory approaches, business solutions and cooperation, as well as research and green technology in order to enable, both in India and in the EU, the required energy transition. And the third phase of this program will start in March next year and will essentially focus on offshore wind, but also green hydrogen. And it is this partnership that has been conducting the EU-India regulatory workshop series, including the one today, in collaboration with FSR for the past 6 years. This ongoing series of events aims to facilitate discussions on various topics related to clean energy transition. And I hope that today we will be able to identify even more synergies to work together on offshore wind. So together, the EU and India are embarking on ambitious offshore wind initiatives, ranging from research and development to capacity building and project implementation. By leveraging each other's strength and expertise, we are not only driving down the costs of offshore wind, but also unlocking new opportunities for sustainable development and green growth. So thank you once again to FSR for organizing this important workshop. And I am very much looking forward to hearing the speakers' insights, but also, of course, the audience's reactions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Johanna. I think you've perfectly summarized and set the stage for the rationale behind not only the series, but the topic of the day. So you've made my life very easy. So thank you so much. And as Johanna mentioned, we look forward not just to the engagement from the speakers, to all the participants. Thank you for joining us. And please feel free to put in your questions in the chat box during the session, or also we have a specific segment where we will be taking up question and answers, so you can actively participate during that time as well. So without further ado, we're very fortunate to have representation from MNRE itself today, and I invite our first speaker for the day, Mr. Lalit Bora, who's Joint Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Parul and Sweta for sending the invitation, and thank you FSR Global for organizing this event in association with the India-EU Strategic Cooperation. I think, am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay. So India has been started its wind energy journey in the somewhere around 1990. However, the actual pace of RE development in India started from the year 2014, and since that we have seen that We just got our last year's wind installation figure, and in the last financial year, we could do the 3,253 megawatt of wind installations in India, and solar installation was somewhere around 15,000 plus. So overall, the RE addition in country during the financial year 23-24 was more than 18,000 megawatt. However, as we all know that the Honorable Prime Minister of India has set a target of 500 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. And looking at that huge target, the out of this 500, the wind has to be about 100 gigawatt. We already have a total installed capacity of somewhere near 46,000 megawatt, and the project of about 15,000 megawatt are in the pipeline. And this year we have already bidded more than 10,000 megawatt of the projects. So those projects will come in next 2 to 3 years, and we have set a trajectory where we will be doing minimum 10 gigawatt of wind, which may be either in the form of the hybrid project or the RTC project, or we have come out with the load following RE bids also. So all these combined together, our aim is that we have to this year in the year 24-25 we have to go beyond 5.5 to 6 gigawatt installations, and then overcome the threshold of installing the 10 gigawatt every year, so that at the end of 2030 we could reach the target of 100 gigawatt. Now in this, the offshore wind has a very important role, because with more and more RE coming up and the variabilities which are associated with the wind and solar, it becomes very essential that we go for the offshore wind, where the variability factor reduces to the large extent. And to work on that, the India has got the first bid issued. So as we know, you can see from the slide which I have shown, we have a huge coastline. So in a way, India is blessed to have the high insulations for the solar installations. At the same time, we have a coastline which is of more than 7,600 kilometer. And we will be, the initial study says that the CUF on these sector will be more than 50%. So that will in turn reduce the LCOE, and owing to the consistency of the offshore wind, we are sure that we will be able to have a capacity of about 423 gigawatt from the various sources. Next, please. So like we all know what are the advantage of the offshore wind. It has a high adequacy and the reliability, lower storage requirement, lower generation reserves, a lower balancing reserves, reduced power from the exchange, and the high employment potential compared to any other RE sources. So this becomes essential because you see the grid managers are always averse to more and more RE entering into the grid, and therefore they when we discuss with them with the advantage of the offshore wind, then they seems to be quite positive and interested in having more of the offshore wind into the system. Next, please. And the scale of offshore wind is very high because the 1 gigawatt will require about 250 to 400 square kilometer. The hub height has to be 150 plus. Then the weight of nacelles and this thing will vary from 400 to 750 ton. Then distance from offshore wind, it can go up to 165 kilometer. However, for the initial projects which we are going to get commissioned in India, we are not moving further off, because to ensure that the cost does not escalate and the confidence of the developers come to the system. It has a huge rotor diameter. The weight of offshore assembly is very high. Depth is about 57 meter and other factor. Next, please. However, the most interesting part is that the global trend of the LCOE is showing a downward trend, and India is one place where we have one of the lowest per capita consumption of the electricity. And in order to complete our SDG 7 goal, we have to ensure that the electricity is available to each and everyone. And for that matters, it becomes very essential that we get electricity, and we get electricity at a lower price. So the reducing trend of the LCOE is a welcome sign, and therefore in last few years we have started speeding up our process for starting the first offshore project in India. Next, please. If you look at the various activities done, we started with the offshore wind energy policy in 2015. Then we did the LiDAR equipment for the wind resource assessment. We got the 2-year reports in 2019. 2022, we came with the strategy paper. And in the strategy paper was again revised in the 2023. But after that, now we have come out with the offshore wind lease rules, which has been notified by the Ministry of External Affairs. And in the month of February, we came out with the first bid for leasing of the offshore wind site for 4,000 megawatt. And the Honorable Finance Minister has already announced in her budget speech that the VGF for the initial offshore wind project will be provided. And we are quite optimistic that by the month of September, we should be in a position to bid out the 500 megawatt of offshore wind projects with VGF, that is viability gap funding from government for the state of Gujarat. And the study for the data collection for the state of Tamil Nadu is going on, and we expect that by next year end or in the start of in the April 2025, we should be able to release the bid for Tamil Nadu VGF as well. Next, please. So if we look at the policy has been made to serve the industry and reduce their burden. So the it specifies that the entire EEZ, that is exclusive economic zone of India, from the coast will be available for the offshore wind development. The MNRE will be the nodal ministry, and the NIWE, which is the National Institute of Wind Energy, will act as a nodal agency, as well as the single window clearance for obtaining the clearances from the various ministries, and identify all the essential elements that need to be considered for the development of the offshore wind projects. Next, please. If I come to the strategy paper, the strategy paper has clearly spelled out the 3 models. The model A is where I have said that the initial data and survey will be done by the NIWE, which is a technical institute for the wind energy in India. And those data will be shared with the prospective developer. And here the government will assure the offtake, and we will provide the viability gap funding so that the prices matches with the prices of the discoms. In this model, we plan to have about 500 megawatt of the coast of Gujarat and 500 of the coast of Tamil Nadu. In model B, for which the bid has already been out, the developer will have the exclusive access to the seabed block to carry out their studies, and then later on they can develop their plant there, and project under this model will be allowed to sell power through the open access route. Let me be clear here that the Indian market is growing at the rate of 8 to 10% electricity market, and the demand in the exchange is very high, and every summer and winter we are touching the higher peak. So the demand of electricity is increasing, and therefore we perceive that the market will be giving the higher returns. When it comes to the Model C will be where the developer can come on its own. He can choose the seabed, he can do the study, and later on it will be bidded, and the developer who has done the study will have the first light of refusals. Next, please. At the same time, the grid connectivity part also, a lot of progress has been done. The initial grid for the 5 gigawatts in Gujarat and 5 gigawatts in the Tamil Nadu, till the offshore pooling station will be provided by the government, and the developer will have to just get the things connected at the offshore substation, from offshore substation to the onshore pooling station, and subsequent integration into the national grid will be done by the Ministry of Power. That will be the PGCIL and the CTUs. Next, please. We have come out with the trajectory as well, and based on this trajectory, we have already issued the bid for under the auction capacity under Model V for 4 gigawatt. As you all know that we are going through the election process in India, and during that time the code of conduct and other things just kick in. Therefore, this capacity of 0.5 gigawatt, which was to be done in the Model A, will be done post-election, and same will be the case for the next year as well, that we have set the trajectory and we will keep on doing bidding for these models based on the learning which we get from the initial bid and the response of the industry. However, we have made that it will be a total 37 gigawatt will be bidded by the year 29-30. Next, please. As you can see that we have demarcated the 5 zones in the Gujarat, that is zone A, B, C, D and E, and in all probability there is a blue mark within the zone B that will also be available to us once it's being given to for some other purpose. Once that is clear, then that can be given to us. So this is the zone which we have demarcated for the offshore wind development in the Gujarat state. Next, please. And out of these zones, one zone has been taken off, which will be auctioned through the VGF support. And the project site which we are envisaging is 500 megawatt plus at this place. The NIWE has done all the study that include the geophysical, geotechnical study. All those data will be shared with the developer so that he can save time and the resources to get these things done. Next, please. So these are the activities which NIWE has already done. I have already told that they have done the geophysical, geotechnical, the environmental impact studies, the stage 1 clearances, all those things has already been done. Next, please. When it comes to the coast of Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, in Tamil Nadu, the potential is much higher. And here we have demarcated the 8 zones in the Gulf of Mannar of the coast of Tamil Nadu. So this is the place where we will be having the most of the offshore wind development. Next, please. And 14 side of the coast of Tamil Nadu, they will be developed across the various zones, and the site 7 under Model A hai, that we are keeping it for the VGF support 500 megawatt, which we are expecting that by end of 25 or the start of the 25 we will auction it. Once the all study is being completed, the study has already been awarded by the NIWE to the concerned agencies. Next, please. Apart from that, we do understand that all these projects will need a development of the port, and therefore we have identified two ports. However, these two ports are tentative ports. Once the project developed and the response comes, then most probably either Tuticorin and Kandla, both the port will be developed, and they will be developed with the support from the government, so that the cost of these does not passed on to the developer. But we are looking for the development of these ports not only for the installations of offshore wind in India, but we are looking it as a place where the export to various offshore wind sites in world, and especially in the nearby area where like even our neighbors Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, they have announced that they will be entering into the offshore wind area, so we can export to those areas as well. Next please. This is some tentative calculations which we have done, and this has been done, most of this research has been done with the support from the DA Denmark, and we are really thankful to them that the Center of Excellence is being run here in the ministry with their support. If we look at the resource assessment activities, so when it comes to the model A, these activities will be done by the NIWE. Then there is a cost of wind turbine, which we are expecting that once the market develops in India and the production starts in India, then these prices will further go down. Then the transmission infrastructure, this infrastructure, part of that is now being done by the PGCIL, so this cost will also go down. Then the installation, commissioning cost, and the total capex. So we are expecting that with these things, the capex cost will go down to about 16 crore or so when it comes to the installations of the projects where the transmission is being provided and the study is being done by the NIWE. Next, please. Yeah, so that's all from my side, and it is really good, and I look forward to listening from the other speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Gora. I think you raised some very important points, not just on the importance of the offshore wind and the potential that India has, but a specific point that you raised on the potential that is there for the region to kind of come together. We already discussed seabed. So, kind of bringing in offshore wind into that would be an interesting point, which I hope we can take up during the Q&A as well. Without further ado, I think Mr. Gora also spoke about the state of Gujarat, and the potential and the demarcated zones. And our next speaker, has experience of working in the state, and Mr. Rajendra Kharul, who's the managing partner and CEO of Climate Hub India. I invite you, sir, and I hope you would also shed some light on your experience in the state. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Parul. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can I share my screen?
Please do. Yes.
Yeah, is that visible?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Parul. Thanks, Shweta, for this opportunity and organizing this workshop, basically, which is a kind of a very burning topic at present, both in Indian context as well as in the global sphere. Also, a lot of discussions about offshore wind energies are happening, and the targets, as everybody knows, probably getting scaled up to 5x, 10x kind of thing from today till 2030. So another 6 to 7 years time frame, the world is expecting probably to add something like 50 gigawatt on an average. Yeah, so I'll be very brief, basically on presentation part, but would like to interact more with the audience and the colleagues participating here. This is the brief of what exactly is happening on the offshore wind energy in India. Over the last decade, the offshore wind development has been there, some progress, some studies, some policies are coming out from time to time. And the government has been very keen and consistently driving this initiative in the Indian context. If you can see on the top, the MNRE has already come out, and JSR has already mentioned about the various initiatives from the MNRE side. The policy came in 2015, then the draft bid for 4 gigawatt came in 2022. Then we had the CBID lease rules published in 2023 December, and then the VGF and the final tender. On the left side, if you see, there are various technical assistance program supported by either EU or Danish organization or UK's FCDO. So there has been a consistent effort on doing some R&D work and studies which will support the Indian stakeholders and the decision making in the Indian context. NIWE has been also involved actively doing some field work on coming out with guidelines for studies and measurements, and have carried out the measurements, of course, in Gujarat as well as in Tamil Nadu also. And as Jason mentioned, they are taking up further steps for some more sites to be have the wind resource measured in the Tamil Nadu area. Beside that, there has been some plans from CTU or CEA for evacuating almost a 10 gigawatt equivalent of offshore wind from both the region, the Tamil Nadu as well as Gujarat. So CEA and CTU is preparing almost 5 gigawatt evacuation plan. There has been the inclusion of offshore wind carbon trading under the Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement, which has been announced by the government of India. And Ministry of Shipping has announced some shipbuilding assistance, wherein the 20% capital subsidy is available for the specialized vehicle which are used for the offshore wind, basically in the Indian context. So some framework or some policy and regulatory framework is evolving. Some studies are happening around this whole concept. However, the key challenges in the Indian context had been, there has been a discussion all the time that the cost is high. JSR has shown the cost of per megawatt cost is about 21 plus crore, and plus additional cost may be there. So the costs in the Indian context, which are estimated by various support programs, are in the range of 21-22 crores kind of per megawatt. We don't have any proven experience as of now in the Indian context in terms of what exactly going to be the cost, delivered cost per se. So naturally, the tariffs are going to be much higher than the expected one. And some of the studies which are done earlier, either the offshore wind studies or some other studies. I had been part of the offshore wind study, which has identified these zones basically, and the program was supported by European Union. Recently, last 2 years, the UK government is also supporting the Aspire program, and I am fortunate again to be part of the Aspire delivery program also, and was leading this offshore wind thing for the Aspire team. So basically, the constraints which are coming out in the Indian context are need to be seen, addressed on a early basis, so that the bottlenecks which are being experienced or being talked about by the stakeholders, those can be addressed, and the project development can happen on an early basis. The infrastructure and the supply chain establishment will take quite a considerable time, and we need to allow that time and then expect the project to come over the period. The grid connection and the integration, I think we are doing remarkably good, and the CEA and CTU has already made up their mind, and the actual ground level plans are being put in place for the 10 gigawatt capacity of evacuation from the offshore space. Policy regulatory is a evolving framework. As and when we are moving ahead, the need-based support is of course there from the MNRE, and we would be looking at some more policy support or some more regulatory clarification probably from the MNRE on the various issues. On the technology adaptation side, basically the scale of that wind turbine is totally different than the onshore. Many people consider onshore and offshore is probably the same industry, but unfortunately it's not, because onshore we are looking at 3 megawatt, 4 megawatt, 5 megawatt kind of a turbine. Here the scale has totally gone in a skyrocketing way, and people have started talking about 12 megawatt, 15 megawatt, probably 20 megawatt turbines are being looked at for the 2030 or beyond the installation for that timeline. So which turbine would be exactly coming to India and specifically suiting the Gujarat market or the Tamil Nadu market, because both the wind regimes are different, the wind power densities are different, the gust factors are different. So the customization of turbine would be essential for the Indian market as such. So we need to basically look at how it is going to evolve and how the OEMs basically respond to this whole developments which are happening in the Indian region. The site assessment and data availability is the most crucial part to kick off the Indian industry. As of now, very limited studies in the ground level studies, I can say, are happened. Only the measurements, as Joint Secretary Sir has said, has happened only in the particular subzone of B3 in Gujarat, where the wind resource measurement, the geotechnical, geophysical, and the EIA has been carried out by NIWA. And similar studies are initiated in Tamil Nadu now, and the reports or the data would be available in a couple of years from now. So basically, investing in site assessment and collecting the data, on-ground data, is going to be the crucial point if we are really keen going ahead with the auction trajectory which has been set forth. So irrespective of what I can say, the model, whether it's model A, B, C, if we can have a mechanism where the resource assessment or some other studies are carried out through a common mechanism, and that data could be made available to the potential developer, irrespective of which model they are developing, and there could be a cost recovery mechanism also if it's so required. So we pursue probably the site assessment, and the surveys and studies could be a major bottleneck, which will be a time consuming in terms of the implementation timelines which we are looking at, and we need to address a few issues around that. Skill manpower or development of skills is going to be the key challenge. This being a new technology, basically we need to learn a lot of things in terms of manufacturing, in terms of establishing supply chain, in terms of the project implementation, even in terms of the guidelines for the projects. Basically, so many things need to be done on the project front, and the whole stakeholders, both from the government side as well as from the industry side, we need, I can say, the initiatives which will be supporting the skill development, specifically for the offshore related component. EIA or the social impact assessment studies would certainly help, and probably that should be the part of the studies which one can expect to be carried out before the bidding, if we are doing that in a common mode. We have been involved in the state discussion for some time, and we are implementing some of the projects with the knowledge partnership from the Shakti Sustainable Foundation, and specifically working with Gujarat, and the similar project is there happening in Tamil Nadu also. And there are some basically interesting things emerging from the state discussions. And states are very keen to look at this new development and willing to play a kind of a proactive role in this new ventures. But since there is a bit of what I can say, clarity is not there. The guidance probably need to be further provided to the state, what exactly they can do, what they cannot do. So those kind of discussion need to be facilitated typically, so that the states can resume their role as early as possible and gear up for this whole development. These are some of the insights which we have gathered from the state discussions. So just for everybody's understanding, and probably we can discuss those further. As I said, the initial surveys and studies will make a lot of difference in terms of curtailing the timeline for the project development. And we should find out more avenues how these studies and surveys can be carried out. Of course, Ministry and NIVE is doing their bit on their part, but can there be further additional mechanisms where surveys and studies can be taken up either by the state or by the other stakeholders, and that data can be utilized by the potential bidders or the period, either model A, B, C, wherever the bids are happening. The second part is the infrastructure development. Can there be a role for the states to play, even right from the port infrastructure development? Okay, right now we are looking at one port or maybe another port in Tamil Nadu. But as we move on, probably the capacity which we are looking at 4 gigawatt, 5 gigawatt annual auction. So that would require more number of ports to be developed. So we should have some kind of a strategic plan around that, and how the state can participate it, where the avenues could be there for state participation in this infrastructure development, that need to be identified. Of course, the capacity building at the state level is also essential, and skilling and reskilling of labor or the overall machinery is a immediate requirement. And some initiatives probably would be most welcome step in that direction. The direct benefits, like Jaisar was mentioning right now, there is a 500 megawatt project announced for the Gujarat, which will be supported by the center for under the VGF mechanism. When we spoke to the industry stakeholder, probably the size of the project typically for the Gujarat market is seen as one of the constraint part, because one need to customize the turbine, one need to customize the other ecosystem which is there, and the scale probably is not the appropriate scale. So we need to look at the additional avenues where probably some more project, at least 500 or 1000 megawatt project can be supported either through state or some other funding mechanisms beyond whatever the government has already committed. So if those happens in parallel, probably the ecosystem development will be more feasible and more lucrative in that terms. And the last point which I would like to make here is basically on the approval parts. As the central approval process is fairly clear, I mean, MNRE NIVE has jotted down how many ministries, and NIVE would be a central contact point or the facilitation center for them. But at the state level, as of now, there is not much clarity how the projects would be handled. And of course, in Gujarat, they have already identified the agency. The Gujarat Power Corporation Limited, GPCL, would be the nodal agency for handling offshore projects. But the similar mechanism need to be there in probably in Tamil Nadu also. So the state approval mechanism and synchronization with the NIVE's approval process, that need a better coordination and clarity on those aspects. So these are some of the insights which are coming out, which I just wanted to share with everyone, and hope it would be useful for the further discussion. Thanks for this opportunity, and look forward to the interactions with the colleagues and the participants. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Karul. I think specifically the recommendations on state support have been very insightful, alongside, of course, the cost aspect, which has been a pressing issue when it comes to offshore wind energy in India. And I hope that we, again, are able to elaborate a bit more on that during the Q&A, as I can already see some participant questions there. But I think having gained some Indian perspective today in the discussion, I now move towards EU and the European expertise and experience when it comes to offshore wind. I think one EU member state which has already been mentioned by both our speakers so far is Denmark. So it's my pleasure to invite our third speaker for this discussion, Mr. Al Bunsever, who is the head of Secretariat Center of Excellence for Offshore Wind and Renewable Energy. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I think Mr. Bora and Mr. Karul have covered most of the developments in India. I would like to, of course, we have been working together with Ministry of New and Renewable Energy and other agencies for a while now, and we have been trying to work together on the lessons from Denmark and how we have developed offshore wind in Denmark. So there are, of course, similarities and some applications that we have tried to implement. But I also want to make a little bit of reference back to Denmark, as you mentioned, to be able to, to be able to reflect on the recent updates from Denmark. But can you see my screen?
Yes. Can you make it presentation mode, sir?
Just a second. This is a PDF. Maybe I should.
Yeah, I think full screen mode.
Just a second. I will stop sharing first, and I will share the PPT instead. Sorry for the delay.
No problem.
Now, and
yeah, perfect. Please go ahead. Oh.
Yeah, I hope you can see my screen now. Center of Excellence is right now I'm working as the head of secretariat at the Center of Excellence for Offshore Wind and Renewable Energy in the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in building in Delhi. This is a joint initiative between Danish Energy Agency and the Indian Ministry. So that's why I am kind of representing both in the middle. I would like to start with a little bit of Danish case for the renewable status. Of course, Denmark, the demand in Denmark is much lower. The maximum demand in Denmark is much lower than India, and the peak capacity is much lower than India. But actually, in Denmark, we can say it's a good case. Denmark is a good case for renewables. There's around 2.5 gigawatt, close to 2.5 gigawatt of offshore wind and 5 gigawatt onshore wind. The solar 3.5 gigawatt, and it has been a lot of renewable integration into the system with wind and solar. You can see in the graph the January, which is actually around 68% of the demand covered by the renewables, and it has been only 64 seconds through the whole year where the demand is not covered by any renewable energy. And if you look at the historical Danish tenders. Of course, there has been lessons learned from Denmark as well since 1990 from the first offshore wind. The tenders have been developed over time, and there has been, of course, from Danish side also some drawbacks, especially during the expensive on-hold project. But there has been a lot of lessons learned, so the market has developed until 2021 in a way where in the Thor tender there all the bids received. There were 6 bids, all of them were 0 bids, and actually we can call it a negative bid because the Danish government also had the opportunity to earn money through the offshore wind bids. And how has this happened? Of course, historically, Denmark has focused more on the market. There has been a political level commitment, a long-term vision. As in the regulatory level, there has been some certainty provided to developers. There has also been a lot of transparency, a lot of market dialogue, keeping close dialogue with the developers, and there has been a lot of free market and competition induced into the competition into the market. So what we can say is, on top of that, there has been, of course, de-risking and economic incentives and financing that will support the development in Denmark. There has been a focus, as I mentioned, mostly on the market. So there hasn't been specific emphasis on the industry. The industry has evolved like side to side with the market regulations. And one of the backbones of this development is, of course, the maritime special planning. We also have worked with our Indian partners, both NIVE and Ministry of Renewable Energy, on coming up with a marine special plan for India, which you can see on the upper right hand, and on the lower right side you can see the Danish marine special planning. So it is basically, we have applied the same kind of methodology, having a rough screening on the technical part, and the fine screening on more of the effects on the social and the environmental part, and then on top of all the layers, applying the specific site-specific effects in the area. So aim is to come up with the best possible and the most available area for offshore wind development. On top of that, of course, strategic environment assessment, which we call C, and the environmental impact assessment, which we call EIA, has also been implemented to identify the nearby effects in the area. And actually, it's also part of de-risking process. We are aiming at identifying the risks in the project-specific side and also on the whole coastline to avoid any kind of showstoppers close to the tender deadline. So this is also to avoid any effects on the environment, negative effects on the environment. So this is also a very important part of the de-risking process for offshore wind development in Denmark. For the permitting side, the Danish Energy Agency is acting as the one-stop shop. So it's an administrative procedure where all the other government agencies from different ministries are being contacted through the Danish Energy Agency. This gives the potential developers more clarity in the process, and also reducing the risk of have to deal with different public authorities. So they only have a single window, which is the Danish Energy Agency, that keeps the contact with the other government agencies, which in India, NIVE is planned to be the single window clearance agency. And of course, on top of all the de-risking processes, one important part is, of course, the offtake risk, and that is handled by, like in most of the European markets, by a CFD. There has been, again, lessons learned, the process in Denmark, but the latest tenders, especially the TOR tender that had 0 bids, uses a two-sided contract for difference. Of course, it's not a very conventional one. So there is, of course, some design differences in the Danish one, especially with the calculation of the reference price. But all in all, this is also a big part of the de-risking process in Denmark while developing offshore wind projects. If you would like to a little bit deep dive into into the latest tender in Denmark. First of all, it's the TOR tender. The area has been identified: offshore substation, export cable, a nearshore substation to be built by the developer, and the whole investment and the market dialogues have been carried out with potential developers. So when the tender starts, actually the developers have a very clear view of how the tender is going to be. The wind speeds are going to be measured by Danish Energy Agency, the geophysical site investigations, environmental impact assessments. All of them are cleared out. The responsibilities are divided between the developer and Danish Energy Agency. So in a way, when the tender has been floated, the developer has a very clear picture of what kind of risk they carry and what kind of risk is carried by the government side. This is just to illustrate the timeline in Denmark from the decision, from the political decision to the full production. Even in a mature market, it takes around 8 to 9 years. We of course, the idea is to shorten the timelines, to improve the permitting processes. But even in a mature market, from the decision-making time to the execution or commissioning time, we should expect something similar to 7 or 8 years. In TOR, the key features of the design was to focus on cost effectiveness. So price was one of the main points, and to reduce the risk and build on time. Of course, international competition is key. So there's no local requirements. The idea is to the best developers in the world, and to use all the tools I explained previously, de-risking tools, to reduce the cost of offshore wind, of the project specifically. After the TOR project, of course, there are some future plans, and these are also very new. And for example, a 9 gigawatt of development is planned for the new tender. It's called the Hesselholt tender, and in this tender, a new feature of this tender is that the state will require 20% ownership of each project, and there will be no subsidies, and minimum requirements on environmental impacts assessments are going to be introduced. So after reaching to a level of almost risk-free market, the Danish government is also concentrating on other aspects that will have more public involvement in the offshore wind projects. And in order to summarize these points, we can say that now there is not a pre-qualification requirements, but there's a minimum requirement. There are minimum requirements that are introduced in this tender, such as the verified environment product declarations of main components, verified life cycle analysis of process construction, recyclable plates, and environmental data collection and social responsibility. Those are the main concentrated. Those are the new introduced parts of this tender. And of course, an important part of it is the overplanting. And here, it is very much related to the hydrogen production. Actually, there are some capacities allocated for offshore wind production in the new sites, but there is not a minimum capacity, so the developer can actually decide to use the whole capacity for hydrogen production. And the upper limit is also not specified. So this means the developer can build part of the site for electricity production and part of the site for hydrogen production. So part of this production can be fed into the grid, and part of the production can be used as for hydrogen production. Of course, in the new upcoming projects, there are new, like the price criteria is like same in the TOR, is going to be the main point. There are new penalties and guarantees, of course, taken from TOR, but also there are new penalty like rules introduced into this tender. But all in all, there will be no direct support coming for this project. But again, in the initial discussions, the CFD is still considered. This is again a little bit more detailed numbers or details of what the minimum requirements will be. For example, for the technical requirements, some experience on offshore energy projects, both oil and gas and offshore wind, will be considered. Some key experience areas are identified, and 3 of these 6 key areas, experience in 3 of these areas are expected from the developer, and 10 years of experience should be proved in these areas. Of course, there are financial requirements as well, but also, as I mentioned, there are some differences in the penalties for delays or in the deficit performance by the developer. And Danish Energy Agency will be again the government agency that will be responsible for the running of these tenders. It's again a big team, a big organization, and a very complex organization. Actually, I'm part of the global cooperation in this organization, and just wanted to give an example of the tender team. There are analysis teams for basically working on the economics of the projects. There's the environmental team working around 10 people for this strategic environmental assessment, and around again 7 people for environmental impact assessment of a specific project. There is the permitting team, another tender team, and legal team are also supporting the offshore wind project from the Danish Energy Agency side. So in total, we can talk about 60 people just for deployment offshore in Denmark for single projects. And this is again, Danish Energy Agency is part of a big steering committee of ministries. So it's the executive agency, but again, as a one-stop shop, it's the agency that is covering most of the communication with the rest of the steering committee. I will stop here, and I would like to thank you for listening. Of course, I will be happy to answer any questions if something is.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Gunsaiver. I think some very informative points on the Danish project tendering conditions, and I hope that during Q&A, our speakers as well as Indian participants would like to react to some of the information that you've shared with us. However, as of now, without further ado, I invite our last speaker for this session. We have with us Mr. Thor Peterson, who's the Vice President for Wind Power at NIRAS. Over to you, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you very much, and thank you to FSR for inviting me to speak here at this interesting forum. I'm happy to be here both personally, but of course also on behalf of NIRAS, now realizing that the, let's say, green energy transition focusing on offshore wind is also coming to India. So you can say many things, good things have already been mentioned here by my, what is it called, presenters before me. So I'll try not to resonate too much, but all of the things I brought have already been mentioned. Anyhow, I have 15 years in offshore wind and have been part of 50 offshore wind farm projects all over the world, not in India yet, but hopefully to come. NIRAS is working with some of the large Indian EPCI contractors in other parts of the world for offshore wind. So I'll just share my screen, and then I will continue in 1 second. And hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes.
So thank you also to Johanna for making the presentation and introduction to the ambitious goals for offshore wind in Europe. 300 gigawatt by 2050 is not unrealizable, but it's definitely a target that requires a lot of focus for all the countries that have relevant sites for offshore wind. Alp already mentioned also the ambitions here in Denmark, where we have installed 2.7 gigawatt and 1 gigawatt with Thor offshore wind farm being developed at the moment. You can say that the situation showed by Alp also indicates that in Denmark, as a mature market, both for renewables and offshore wind, we have the entirety of our power production covered by renewables on a good day with a lot of wind. That means, of course, forwardly, it's a different business case or the incentive to install offshore wind in Denmark. So the up to 9 gigawatt to be tendered here in 2024 in Denmark will have to be, let's say, used for other things than directly as supplied to the private consumers. And that could be, of course, hydrogen. It's just highlighting that a challenge in a mature market like ours is that the business case have many more steps to mature and progress downstream for the offshore wind to be what's it called, an attractive business. But of course, I'm not being negative here. I think it's very interesting forwardly the Danish market as well. It's just could mean some smaller obstacles on the way. Just a short thing about NIRAS. NIRAS is a multidisciplinary consultancy company. We work, internationally all over the world. We have offices in 34 countries, as you can see here by the map. Not in India, as already mentioned, but we are doing projects in India and have also been involved in Sri Lanka for offshore wind. After we crossed into the new year here in 2024, we surpassed 3,000 staff. Of course, they are not all working in offshore wind, which I will come back to in a minute. NIRAS works across a number of markets, as you can see here. Bigger parts is on international consulting, process industry, water and utilities, and also in building. If we jump to the far right, you can see the depiction here, or the schematic depiction of offshore wind as part of energy and infrastructure. So on a daily basis, I sit as part of the, let's say, the infrastructure vertical in NIRAS, and let's say the services and the staff and the competences we provide comes from energy or environment and planning. Up here, you can see we are 130 staff. So if you take sort of a glimpse through our, what's it called, daily life, we would have about 130 people working with offshore wind. So that's quite considerable. In total, we have been part of not the realization of 50 gigawatt, because I believe the total capacity installed nowadays is around 45, maybe a little bit more. But we have provided our input to around 50 gigawatt, and that spans back to 1991, the very first offshore wind farm here in Denmark called Vindeby, where we did the detailed design. So in fact, we have 35 years experience in offshore wind. Offshore wind itself have, as you can calculate, 33 years anniversary this year. NEAS provides a one-stop, what's it called, service offering, environmental permitting and consent. I do understand that relies, of course, to the markets where we have local presence. It requires local presence to make an effective implementation and development of offshore wind when it comes to EIA permitting and consent. And in the case we move into a emerging market, we often team up with local consultants to benchmark the local procedure up against the international procedure, also to make sure that the projects are bankable. The other arm of our activities in offshore wind are engineering consultancy, which comes from very early stage with feasibility, levelized cost of energy, site selection, site layout, site conditions, and it goes all the way to the final investment decision, which also includes the detailed design. And typically we let the project go there, but if the client wants, we also take part in the later stages for installation, O&M, and have also done 4 decommissioning projects in Europe, and actually did the decommissioning of Vindeby we helped design. So last year we delivered 140 man years of work into realizing this green energy transition in offshore wind, and hopefully that could also be expanded to India. Enough about NEAS, and I'll keep it short, also in due respect of time here. So actually I'll just keep this slide here and I'll save the rest. So from a consultant's point of view, I've listed, I could possibly list 20, 30 challenges and opportunities that would be interesting to discuss, but I chose 7 to bring here, which I, as part of a consultancy for offshore wind, almost meet on a daily basis. And as you can see here, some of them have already been mentioned before. Ports is always an issue, and in the development phase, which mentioned by Alp, in Denmark is between 7 and 10 years, depending on the project, and delays. Typically, you would need to realize port developments 2 years into that phase. So already, let's say in the very early stages, it is a challenge to assess the available ports, because in India and also in Denmark, we have a number of ports which could be relevant for ports for offshore wind, But when it comes to assessing them, and in reality, it will only be very few of the ports which would be developed and relevant for offshore wind. So that needs to be early on decided, also so that the state support, as mentioned here in the presentations, can focus on financing and assisting the port authorities in making the right development steps, and that such that the infrastructure being developed are relevant both for installation, service, and base port. The next one I have here is supply chain, and that's not just in emerging markets at the moment, that's also in mature. The vessels and supply chain are heavily pressed. If I take an example on the vessels at the moment, most of the contractors working in offshore wind have a backlog which are contracted 5 years ahead now. And that obviously entails a challenge when you are standing in a project of, what could it be in India, 5 to 10 years to develop offshore wind. You already need to make the contracts halfway through the development process. Further to that, if I take a jump here, you can say, while India is a very interesting and ambitious market, of course, there are also other markets around the world which are moving very fast ahead. And they are also mature markets, you can say, where the financials and the business case and all that has been set up before. And developers and also the supply chain and the vessels may be attracted to stay in this market or may not. That needs to be carefully considered such that the relevant installation, service, and O&M vessels are available to the Indian market. One choice could, of course, be to develop new vessels or local vessels in India. Also mentioned previously, grid is usually quite a big area to focus on in the early stages. The unclear grid connection and the infrastructure needed to develop it needs to be considered early on. Typically, that's done through a grid assessment, which we also do all over the world. That would include onshore connection points, talks with the transmission system operator and also the distribution system operator. Other aspects challenging is, of course, balancing the grid and achieving some kind of sector coupling. Offshore wind is not a continuous and constant delivery of power. Everyone knows that. It delivers power when the wind is blowing. So the balancing of the grid needs to be considered such that at least the average or the lowest supply can be as high as possible for the financial setup of the offshore wind. I've written here also financing across territories and borders. It sounds very abrupt. It's not. It's more to say that in many countries it needs to be approved from government or authorities that foreign investment can come in and take part in the offshore wind. And when a typical setup between an international developer and a local developer to develop an offshore wind farm, that needs to be in place, of course, for the financial backing to come into play. I can also say here that the last 2-3 years in offshore wind, if you take it on a global perspective, have really shown the industry that the increasing costs together with inflation has put a high pressure on offshore wind. The big Danish developer Ørsted have withdrawn with themselves from projects in US. We've seen projects in UK last year that didn't have any tenders when the tender was opened due to the pressed financial setup. And that's caused, among other things, changes in the cost from the approval until you can say the development, finalizing the development, which couldn't be accommodated in the financial setup. Other markets, competition and focus, I think we just touched upon it. But of course, as Johanna said, 300 gigawatt ambition in Europe means, of course, it's a growing industry. There's a lot of players, but there's also really not enough resources and competences to realize this. So we need to be better at sharing the knowledge and also sharing the will to come and assist and develop in emerging markets. And the will is there, don't worry. We would be happy to come to India and work. Permit consent, the EIA, I think Alp already mentioned a lot of that. Of course, there is a high need to do risk management for all of the showstoppers in the permitting and consent phase. I don't think I will go into that. That has already been mentioned. And the last thing I have here is the political ambitions. Governments have a certain period to implement their politics and regulations. And offshore wind, of course, takes 7 to 10 years from decision to power production. So typically, you could see some delays with change of governments and politics and this, but of course, the overall motivation for green energy transition will be there for all of us. So I'll keep it effective, and I'll stop here and hand back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Peterson. Very interesting points. And due to paucity of time, I'm going to dive directly into the questions that have been posed by some of the participants. And I think one question actually relates to what Mr. Peterson was just presenting on the challenges that emerge. And we have a question which asks to kind of throw some light on the experience of EU when it comes to transmission grid planning on offshore power system. So maybe Mr. Albunsaver or Peterson, would you like to share any of that experience on the grid planning impact?
Well, I would like to hand this over to Alp, if possible, as the representative for the Danish Energy Agency.
Sure. Yes, thank you. Yes, I can try to explain it from like from the public side how it is done. So there has been also some developments through the offshore wind project, like historical development of offshore wind projects in Denmark. So previously, the offshore wind developers were responsible for the turbines and the array cables up to the offshore substation. And Danish Energy Agency was responsible for delegating this grid planning or the power evacuation planning to Energinet. So it is the Danish TSO. So Danish TSO Energinet was responsible for planning and building, not themselves, maybe to a third party, of the offshore substation, the export cable, onshore substation, and the onshore grid. Of course, this cost was kind of laid out in the market dialogue and communicated to the developers. So the cost was borne by the developers. So the developers already knew in advance how much they would pay for the power evacuation infrastructure. But Energinet basically was mandated by Danish Energy Agency to design and build the offshore infrastructure. Of course, over time, as the market develops, as the prices go down, of course, the responsibility is more given to the developer. For example, in the Thor project, the offshore substation design and building is given to the developer. The ownership of that area is given to the developer. And the idea behind was that the experienced developers with their portfolio and with their know-how actually can find a much better solution, a much cheaper solution for offshore substation. And the new tenders will be also more the export cable will be also given to the responsibility of the developer. And future plans, maybe the onshore part will be more given to the developer. So it's more it's less and less regulated and more given to the market over time as the market matures. But these steps need to be taken really at good time, not without any like with the maturation steps over time, because price is very important. The idea is to always keep the price, but at the same time develop a market that is efficient. So that is how I can try to explain without into electrical details, but I can say the responsibilities are mostly Energinet.
Thank you. So I think we also have two related questions on this. The first one is that is there any spillage of offshore wind generation on account of high grid frequency? And also if there has been any study done for grid balancing of offshore wind generation in India. So any of the speakers, if they would like to respond to this? Alp, maybe you'd like to take the...
I mean, it is so I personally am not the one working on the grid balancing, but the Danish Energy Agency team is also working with other public authorities, government agencies in India. For example, we have also an expert seconded to Grid India, so old name also. They have been working on this, not specifically on offshore wind, but on balancing issues of onshore wind and solar on specific states. So from our side, I can say no, not yet, but we are going hand in hand on these programs. So I'm working on the offshore program, but of course with the offshore, like the intermittent power introduced into the grid, we will also tackle these problems of how they are handled. But I can say the good thing about offshore wind is that it has a more smoother profile compared to solar and wind. So of course this is an area that needs to be covered, but at the same time, as Mr. Bora mentioned in his presentation, it brings less issues compared to other renewable energy resources.
I'll just add here
Sure.
that if we look at the Indian grid system, so the India is uniquely placed to have a one grid for the entire country, and our grid is already having a total renewable of about 185 gigawatt, and out of which the variable renewable which is going into the grid is about 130 gigawatt. And by 2030 we already come out with a plan where we are going to have the expansion of everything, and by 2030 we are going to have about 500 gigawatt of the renewable, out of which more than 400 gigawatt will be the variable RE. So in that, the addition of about 30 gigawatt of offshore wind will not have much of the challenge, because offshore wind is much more smoother and much more easily integrated into the system. However, having said that, the Grid India CA has been doing all such studies, and they are taking care that how they should increase their reserve so that they can do the integration. Apart from that, we already have the renewable energy management center in most of the RE rich states, and further where the RE is reaching about 30% of the total installed capacity, the additional REMCs are being set up in those states. So these REMCs, along with the load dispense centers, which are 5 in the country, are trying to see that how they can manage the grid, and the RE doesn't have much of the effect on the grid.
Thank you, Mr. Bora. I think we also have multiple questions on the costing aspect, as expected. What I'm going to do is try to club these questions, put them forward, and due to paucity of time, I'll ask each of the speakers to react and maybe also add their concluding remarks as they comment on the question. So one of the question is that it's great to see reducing trend of LCOE of OSUW projects globally, but is it based on CCFD component, that is carbon contracts for difference? And if so, then actual LCOE is more than what is being projected. Another question is that what may be the CUF of the offshore wind at the coast of Gujarat and Tamil Nadu? Again, more specific questions on the LCOE of India. And also we have one question which states that while generally the capital cost of offshore will be higher than inland site, whether there's any assessment that has been done to say what would be the extent of this cost differential, and also the additional environmental impact due to it being offshore. So I will restrict myself here. There are other multiple related questions, but I think we'll just go by the order of speakers. So I request you to react to the question and also add a line of concluding remark, if I may. Mr. Bora.
Yeah. So when it comes to the CUF in the coast of Gujarat, as per our study, it is coming somewhere around 40 CUF is coming. And when it comes to the coast of Tamil Nadu, as of now, because Tamil Nadu, the field study has not been done. So whatever study has been done based on the satellite data, it gives the CUF of 47%. And we are expecting that with the ground data coming up, it will be touching somewhere around 49 to 50. That will be the CUF. When it comes to the LCOE, so like we have done our own calculations based on these CUFs and profiles, and we have found that the cost somewhere in Gujarat, based on the data which were available about 1.5 years back, was coming to about 7 rupees. And when it comes to in the Tamil Nadu, then it was coming to about 5.2 rupees per unit. However, if we add the cost of the multipliers, RE multiplier, so which already the Ministry of Power has more or less approved, and it will be notified soon by the CRC, as I have seen one of the question was about the carbon multiplier as well. So if that is being done, then the cost will further go down. And I think ALP can add more to this because he is the one who has been associated with all these calculations.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Bora. Mr. Kharul?
Mr. Alp, would like to go first?
I can try. I think, this, as Mr. Bora mentioned, these studies these numbers are coming from 1.5 years ago. So with the supply chain developments, although we are seeing that the costs are coming down in mature markets, we can easily see the increases of, as Mr. Peterson mentioned, some non-participants, some of the tenders in UK, US, and some companies actually canceling their projects. So supply chain effects have been really supply chain effects had really impact on the project development recently, and we should expect a similar impact on the numbers that we calculated 1.5 years ago. Other than that, the general trend of cost going down, at least I can tell from Denmark, is actually less important to the carbon market. It's all the de-risking elements that has been taken into consideration that has developed the Danish market. So in that sense, that is what also we would like to achieve in India with using all the tools, and of course in Europe also market using the exchange market or markets had a big impact on the final cost, especially on de-risking the final cost of offshore. So those are the things I can say. Hopefully we will see the same developments in India, because I think personally, but a lot of my colleagues also think it is better to have as precise cost of electricity, the real-time cost of electricity as much as possible is beneficial in terms of planning, in terms of investments, and in terms of de-risking more effectively, rather than going on very long contracts, which is also necessary in complementing the market.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, Mr. Kharul.
Yeah, thanks. I had a different perspective on the LCOE and the cost estimates, basically. Most of the time, this is seen as the cost of the LCOE as on date. But one need to remember that whatever the cost estimates are there, that is for the future, when the project is going to get commissioned, maybe after 6, 7 years, 10 years from now. So the LCOE need to be taken in that sense, and the numbers are based on today's estimates. Probably the realization of those numbers of LCOE would be at a later date of maybe a couple of years down the line. Having said that, there was a question on CFD also. In the matured market like UK or maybe some other European markets, the subsidies are more or less now going to zero, or there have been incidences where negative subsidies are also quoted. So the markets, as the market gets matured, the scales get right, probably there won't be any subsidy requirement or support requirement from the government side. Since India is the maturing or is just the beginning of this particular aspect, couple of projects, couple of capacities, at a few gigawatts of capacities initially will very much require the subsidy support, or maybe there is some indirect support in terms of RECs and some other incentives, maybe in terms of custom benefits and other things, which will drive down the LCOE in the Indian market. So we need to customize our cost model, our LCOE modeling in the Indian context, and then see how these numbers get reflected in the Indian context as such. But given globally the numbers are in the range of 6-7 cents per unit or per kilowatt hour, the Indian LCOE probably would be slightly higher compared to that, but that will be for the initial projects. But over the period, we can also expect the similar numbers as the market matures probably will be close to or less than at least 10 cents per kilowatt hour.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for this.
Thank you. Mr. Thor Peterson, any concluding remarks, reactions?
Well, I've also followed the LCOE deduction over the past 15 years, and also taking part in developments and design and research to reduce the levelized cost of energy, and I'm of course very much in favor of that. Of course, it shouldn't go to a race to the bottom to simply increase the turbine size in expense of generating a supply chain which is pressed on the finances, because it needs to be a win-win situation for the companies involved to make a success for the offshore wind installation in the future. I guess most of the offshore wind farms in Europe are serious subsidy bids at the moment. They are fully commercial. Of course, considerations to move some of the packages, maybe the export cable package, to the TSO when the project finance is pressed, has been done previously. But I think just in my view, at least in mature markets, the LCOE doesn't need to go further down at the moment. We are where we need to be. So thank you for the invitation to join.
Thank you so much. And I wish we could have continued the discussion. Looking at the Q&A box, there's a lot more, which basically shows, what an important topic offshore wind is for India as well as for EU. And I hope, even though this is our concluding session for this cycle, but the discussions and the cooperation carries through. Before we bid goodbye, I would like for us to maybe take a picture. Amrita, can we have a virtual image for us?
Sure. I would request everyone to just look into the camera for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Johanna. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the participants for taking time out. And we had a wonderful time, and I hope you did too. Hopefully see you in the 7th cycle. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.